Scaling champions and anyone with true damage are absolutely nuts right now, while assassins are in the weakest state they've seen in years. There are so many new massive trends emerging in 12.10, so let's get you guys completely up to date with everything thanks to the help of our challenger players and taking into account the most recent data. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. True damage is the name of the game in 12.10, and Fiora is absolutely thriving. Not only does Fiora possess true damage, but she scales tremendously well, which has locked her in as an OP top lane pick. A super underrated build that can turn your Fiora even more godlike is rushing Divine Sunderer into Blade of the Ruined King. Both items have % health damage, so they do a great job at countering the durability update. We love trying to find those new underrated gems to notify you guys of before they catch fire, and Lilia top is one for 12.10. Lilia in general for top and jungle is amazing with the durability update, as she's a champ who thrives in drawn out fights and can abuse % health items. Liandry's and Demonic Embrace are core for Lilia, and both provide that sweet % health damage you want for this meta. There are a couple viable builds you can run on Lilia top depending on the matchup. Frozen Heart Rush is super broken against any auto-reliant top laner, while Liandry's is best into spellcasting bruisers or AP champs. Make sure to run Conquer as the keystone and pick up Resolve for secondaries with bone plating and unflinching. Taking a look at the top lane tier list, we have Olaf, Fiora, Darius, and Kayle as the highest priority solo queue carries. Not much of a surprise that Kayle is targeted with a hotfix nerf, but keep in mind her win rate is topping 55%, so the nerf will just help to bring her in line with the other OP picks. With so many of these true damage and scaling top lane picks rising in popularity, tanks have not been performing as well as anticipated. As a result, we'll be moving Malphite and Tom back down into A tier for mid-patch. Ornn is definitely the best tank top laner you can play, but we will be shifting him from OP into S. Other true damage top laners like Olaf, Gwen, and Darius are popping off in 12.10, so they are great options to add to your champion pool. Bruiser and tank mains are going to hate us for saying this, but Vayne top is super broken right now too. A few champs hit the hardest by the durability update were Aurelia, Akali, and Renekton. All three of them rely more on snowballing early and struggle so much more the later games drag on, which doesn't make them as reliable for the current meta. Renekton is the lucky one out of the three who will receive a hotfix buff, but it won't be enough to shift him back into meta. It's best to play a champion like Gwen, Gangplank, or Lilia who can all do quite well in lane but scale so much better. Top 3 low elo recommendations for 12.10 include Garen, Yorick, and Nasus. Olaf, Fiora, and Kayle are all top of our ban list. We're seeing a very similar trend emerge in the jungle, where tanks are taking the back seat while scaling skirmishers are dominating. Shyvana is a perfect example of the latter, as she wants the game to drag out so she can secure as many dragons as possible and win off of soul. The tanky bruiser version of Shyvana is way too broken right now, as she's impossible to kill but has plenty of damage to go around. Shiv is our new #1 low elo jungler of the patch, so look into picking her up if you want to climb fast. Not only have tanks become weaker, but so have bursty assassins like Diana. Riot has lined up a hotfix buff, but even then, we believe you should change the way you play Diana. The Rocket Belt build is pretty dead now in 12.10, and if you want to play Diana optimally, it's actually best to run a hybrid setup. We featured this build in one of our recent OP off-meta builds videos, and it revolves around Sunfire with Demonic Embrace. You rush Nashers into Sunfire second and Demonic third. The build works perfectly for this meta where it's much harder to one-shot, so you need to be able to put out work in extended fights. All in all, Diana is slightly weaker than in previous patches, and there are better alternatives now, so you'll find her slotting into our A tier. Having a look at the jungle tier list, it's Shyvana, Trundle, Volibear, and Wukong locking down the OP tier slots. All the champions we have moved up for mid-patch have a common theme among them, and that is that they dominate the longer fights last. Shyvana, Talia, Lilia, and Viego are all loving 12.10 as they don't rely on bursting targets to be successful. Respect to any Ivern mains that are left, as the champion is super far down the gutter in 12.10. Ivern already had a difficult time succeeding due to Serpent's Fang, and with Riot nerfing his core items, along with his E-Shield, he has become obsolete. You'll notice that Nunu and Rammus have dropped for mid-patch, and that's due to them struggling against the scaling bruisers that are so prevalent. Rammus especially loved playing against those heavy AD comps, but with AD Assassins seeing way less play this patch and tank shredders like Kog and Vayne on the rise, it's turned out more difficult for Rammus to fit in. Master Yi, Volibear, and Shyvana are the top 3 junglers to climb low elo. Volibear, Shyvana, or Wukong are all really good ban options. The true damage theme continues as we head over to mid lane with Vel'Koz seeing a nice spike in power. As a champion who rushes Liandry's and has true damage from his passive, Vel'Koz is super underrated in 12.10. Many burst mages or assassins have fallen in strength, but these consistent damage mages who don't rely on one-shotting and one spell rotation have all become significantly stronger. A bump from A to S tier is in order for Vel'Koz. Brand is arguably the most undervalued mid laner for 12.10 and moves all the way up into our S tier. Brand is being hit with a hotfix nerf, but we expect his power level to remain high. Not only can Brand abuse Liandry's like Vel'Koz, but he also has the luxury of running Demonic Embrace. Champions that can abuse this item combination are popping off in 12.10, and rightfully so. The build hard counters the durability changes, and combined with Brand's percent health damage from passive, makes him a monster pickup. The mid lane tier list has a bunch of alterations, as Veigar, Anivia, and Kayle will be joining Swave and Taliyah in the OP tier. Veigar being a scaling mid is amazing, while Anivia is dominating due to her consistent damage nature and ability to run Liandry's. More health early on really helps these weaker early game mids like Anivia and Veigar, since their core weakness has always been escaping the first couple levels. Anivia is one of the few mids actually hit with a hotfix nerf, which just goes to show how crazy this patch has been for her. Victor, Orianna, and Twisted Fate are a couple of other notables that we will be adjusting up the tier list, as mages who thrive in skirmishes are doing great. Vice versa, champions like Vex, Fizz, and LeBlanc, who rely more on their single target one-shots, have really fallen off. Many champions were hit with nerfs to their healing and have survived just fine, but Vladimir is an exception. Vlad has really been feeling the effects of his nerfs, and as a result, his win rate has plummeted by about 5%. In our pre-patch tier list, we originally anticipated Vlad to survive because we hadn't seen the exact numbers on his heal nerfs, but now that they're live, he's evidently weaker. Riot has gone ahead and issued Vlad a hotfix buff to help compensate. Top 3 low elo mids for 12.10 are Veigar, Malzahar, and Annie. Taliyah, Victor, and Kassadin are all being picked a ton and are very strong, so they're good bans to consider. Hands down, the best ADC for 12.10 is Kog'Maw. What more could you really ask for? Kog is percent health damage from W, can transition into tank items later on, and his number one weakness has been alleviated. Kog's early game really isn't as bad as some people make it out to be, and now that he's got that extra durability, getting to the mid game is so much easier. The fact aggro supports like Leona and Not have fallen in play rate this patch, while enchanters have become even better, is the cherry on top for Kog'Maw. Goes without saying, but Kog'Maw is an OP tier for mid patch. So, Kog was the biggest winner for all ADCs in 12.10, but who was the biggest loser? Draven is definitely up there, as his scaling power is lackluster, he doesn't shred health stackers very well, and it's harder to secure kills in lane now. Draven's passive also becomes indirectly weaker this patch, due to the fact that kills are harder to come by. Draven is one champ that Riot has chosen to hotfix for mid-patch, so he will see a little bump back up in strength. Definitely better options higher up the tier list, as Draven will be placed in B tier for mid-patch. The ADC tier list features the two best champions at shredding health stackers in the OP tier being Kog and Vayne. Vayne is being hit with a hotfix nerf, but Kog'Maw slips past unscathed, which is pretty surprising. Lucian and Jhin are moving into S tier, and it's not because they've become significantly weaker, just more so that Kog'Maw and Vayne are a cut above. As anticipated, Mage's bot lane are super broken in 12.10 and will continue to be very undervalued pickups. Along with Kog'Maw and Vayne, Twitch is another great scaling marksman that should be highly prioritized. The best low elo bot lane carries are Veigar, MF, and Kog'Maw. Vayne, Lucian, and Kog'Maw are the best bans of the patch. Zilean is now an OP support for the first time in Season 12. With how the meta has shifted, Zilean's kit fits in way too well. He has consistent speed boosts to allow his ADCs to stay untouchable. Zil with Kog'Maw is godlike this patch, as Zilean shores up Kog'Maw's weakness of having no mobility, while also providing him with an extra life. A Kog'Maw with 2 lives in this meta is extremely scary. It's not just Kog'Maw though, as Zilean with Kayle or Shyvana is equally as strong, and you can legit 2v8 games later on. Nautilus is one support who has become indirectly weaker for 12.10. Added health early on means less ability to capitalize on pick plays, and as a result, hinders the value of Naut. If you don't come out of lane with a lead, then supports like Zilean, Renata, or Lulu are going to be so much more useful later on. Locket was also nerfed, and for some odd reason, 75% of Naut players are still building the item instead of Even Shroud. The Locket spam may actually be skewing his win rate to the downside more than it should be right now, but Naut is still weaker regardless. From S to A tier is what we have in store for Naut. Zillion, Renata Glask, and Senna are the 3 most OP supports for mid-patch. As expected, Senna is being hotfixed right out of the gate, but considering her win rate is topping 55%, we don't see her falling significantly in power. We covered Vel'Koz and Brand's rise in strength for mid lane, and they are also moving up as supports. More durability early game is amazing for both champions, as they are now less vulnerable to all-in plays. Vel and Brand have always been super valuable as the game progresses, so now that it's easier to transition into the mid-game, they're loving 12.10. Yuumi has been hit harder than most enchanters this patch with her passive and E being nerfed. Couple this with Moonstone dropping in power and Yuumi dropped to being one of the weaker supports, so Riot is issuing a hotfix buff. Our top 3 low elo support recommendations are Soraka, Brand, and Zyra. Renata Glask, Soraka, and Senna are who you should prioritize your ban on the most. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. The meta will be shifting rapidly over the next few patches as hotfix changes roll in, so some champions may be moving from tier to tier every single patch. It's going to be a hectic few patches before we settle into a stable meta, but we're going to do our best to keep you guys completely up to date with all the new trends that emerge. Until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you back soon.